Hey ladies and gentlemen, Adrian here for Digital Dojos, and today we're going to be recapping everything that was announced at WWDC 2020. So Apple had their Worldwide Developer Conference, and this time, given the state of the world right now in the pandemic, it was a virtual Worldwide Developers Conference. That said, it was live streamed across the internet, and typically, I have been covering this event since I think as early as 2008.
Hey guys, Keguru here. Today got a pretty long video for you guys covering the first part of WWDC. That's my new thing, WWDC 2008. The first part of the keynote, I'm pretty sure.
I've done a live stream where we do live coverage and commentary, and this is the first time in a year that that live stream got taken down and received a DMCA notice from YouTube and Apple due to the fact that I believe it was because I had the rebroadcasted stream. However, it wasn't monetized, which I already know. I've been through this. I know not to monetize content like that due to copyright. So remove monetization. I was doing actual commentary and live coverage of the event, whereas other outlets were just rebroadcasting the stream directly. So maybe or maybe it doesn't fall under fair use. I don't know. I'll let that appeal go through and see where we end up. Anyways, let's talk about what was announced at WWDC. First and foremost, iOS 14. The major takeaways here is Apple, it's really Apple kind of meets Android in a sense. We're getting a lot of features that we've been wanting to see throughout the years, and Apple's finally delivering on some of them. Of course, this is their first iteration, so we'll see how it goes. First and foremost, the home screen now has widget customization options, so you can now add widgets finally to your home screen. Again, I know you Android users have been used to this, or for that matter, jailbreak users, if you're on iOS 13.5, may have been used to that as well. So you now have the ability to do native apps like weather and whatnot, and third-party apps will soon follow up with the ability to see quickly at a glance on your home screen widgets. On top of that, the app library. So this is kind of like similar to the app drawer in Android, where you can swipe over to your home screen and see a list of apps that you have installed on your phone, making it easier to navigate. And rather than you swiping continuously through home pages, you have it in more organized view. Additionally, some other things that were rehauled in terms of the interface in iOS 14 were the call screens. They're finally now much more minimal and useful, so that you're not completely taken over by a full-on home call screen. You now have in that same kind of category a picture-in-picture mode for things like FaceTime. So when you're in FaceTime and you swipe out to check like your calendar or social media or something that your friend's talking about, you're no longer paused and you can't see the conversation. They can actually stay in tune with the picture-in-picture mode. You also got a couple of new apps, things like the Translate app, which is interesting to see them competing with the likes of Google on that end. But yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to translate on the fly via text and, of course, do things like input text for one language to convert to the other and what have you. Siri has additionally also got a new look and feel. When you're using Siri now, it doesn't fully take over your screen, and that's kind of the theme with iOS. They try to really kind of minimize taking you out of the iOS experience in the sense of like these full-on screens like the call screen or Siri, which would formally take over the experience. You just now have a much more minimal, compact look to Siri. HomeKit got some updates with some things like suggestions for automations when you're using them. Automations are things like if you get close to your house to open the garage door, if you have the smart devices, or turn on the lights. Speaking of lighting, you now have adaptive lighting support. So depending on your bulbs, if they support, for example, like Philips Hues, when you tell HomeKit to turn on your lights in the morning, it sets it to a much brighter hue. Depending on the end of the day, you might set it to a more softer hue. Again, depending on your settings, but that is adaptive lighting. And then CarPlay. CarPlay got support for keyless entry with your phone. So now, similar to like Tesla's, you can use your phone if your manufacturer supports it in CarPlay 14 and iOS 14 to unlock your car. They showed it with the BMW that's going to be supporting it, but again, I'm sure more manufacturers will follow up. So yeah, that was a lot of what we saw in iOS 14. I think the other main big thing that I wanted to address, and my favorite overhaul, was that of Messages. The Messages app across iOS, iPad, and Mac is now getting overhauled and getting added support for much needed group organization. So in those group conversations, you can now do inline replies to specific messages within a group conversation, so it's more neater and organized. You have the easy ability to sort through conversations. You can pin conversations. Again, much needed just organization across the Messages app as a whole, which is a lot of reason people still stick to iOS. If you think of it, iMessage is a big thing for a lot of people. So to get these things like quick shortcuts, pins, I guess if you're into Memoji, and inline replies is a nice touch. Moving on to iPadOS. It got a lot of the similar features that we saw in iOS 14 with the widget support and whatnot, but the big thing that iPadOS touted was that of the new scribble feature, or the handwritten to text conversion. So if you're a big user of the Apple Pencil, you now have more ability to use it across the board in iPadOS, meaning that, for example, when you're in a web browser, you don't have to tap and then or fold out your keyboard. You can actually just draw and write in what you're trying to search for, and it'll automatically convert that into text. Additionally, apps like Notes have further support for the Apple Pencil, automatically recognizing shapes you're trying to draw. Or, for example, when you take notes, you can easily resize, shape them, and or copy the actual handwritten notes that you wrote out, and then paste them into another app as plain text. So it has great recognition for handwritten notes to actual plain text conversion. So yeah, the whole scribble feature across iPadOS will kind of unify the whole pencil experience, make sure that it's more usable across the overall OS interface. Now, before I go into macOS, I did want to mention WatchOS 7 and the updates we saw there. Though minimal, it's still important. You know, a lot of people love their Apple Watch for all the health benefits and all the tracking information, so they played a lot on those updates, introducing a new sleep app to help tracking sleep, and when you're wearing them at night so you can get those sleep results and tests, as well as a new hand washing feature to remind you when to, wash, or not just washing hands, but how long you should be doing it. Very on point with the kind of current situation we're in today. And then updates to the fitness, what they're now calling the fitness app. So your workouts are more expanded for a variety of workouts. For example, they added support for like dancing. So rather than just your traditional like running a couple miles or what have you, you can say that you're doing like a dance routine, and it's smart enough to recognize what type of routine you're doing based on the motion and all the sensors built into the Apple Watch, and record that data in your health app. Lastly, they also did things like custom watch faces. They added more support for that and the ability to now share your watch faces with like family and friends. So again, nice touch there. All right, moving on to the Mac Daddy, all pun intended, Mac OS for the desktops and laptops out there. It's now officially Mac OS Big Sur will be the latest addition to Apple's lineup. And it's got an all-new design. And when I say all-new design, I really mean that it took a lot of iOS and iPadOS and brought it to the Mac. It's funny, we thought a lot about saying Apple take Mac OS and push it out to an iPad or the iPhone, but really it's backwards. We're seeing the mobile OS really take over and come back to the desktop experience. So you're seeing these kind of new rounded design, which I don't know if I'm a fan of the new look for Big Sur. We'll have to see, but with that, you got a couple other features, of course. You got Control Center being brought to the Mac, which allows you to see all those widgets that you see on iPad and iPhone as well on your Mac. A completely rebuilt Safari, so Safari just reworked and re-engineered to be that much faster, but more importantly, that much more secure, built with a lot of privacy in mind. So Safari is doing a lot of things like giving you a new extension store to install safe extensions similar to that of Google Chrome, a privacy report on web pages that you're browsing, so you know what web pages are tracking and what data trackers are using on their specific site, all built into Safari. You don't need a third-party extension. The homepage or new home tab is going to be new and allow you to customize that interface as well, so you have things at a glance, and you have better tab management overall across Safari. So this is probably one of the times I'm going to try it out and see how it performs across the Mac. It's always been more efficient than Google Chrome, which has always been some sort of a resource hog across the board. But this will definitely be the first time I have to try using Safari mainly on my Mac and see how that goes. As iPadOS and I mentioned on iOS, macOS will as well be getting the iMessage updates across the board. More specifically in the Mac, you'll have better search capabilities across iMessages, so you can actually search between like images and other content that's shared in your conversations, which is always a nice touch because, again, how important iMessage is to so many of us on the platform. The big news here with macOS is the transition, however, to ARM-based processors. So early on, Apple was using things like PowerPCs back in the day. They made the big transition and leap to Intel, which was a huge announcement and a huge increase in performance and efficiency. And then here now in 2020, we have another leap from Intel to Apple's ARM-based processors. The ARM-based processors you see across their line of devices, from their Apple iPhones to their iPad. These ARM processors, even in their Apple TV, are built by Apple. So it's true unification of both software and hardware that we've seen be highly successful in terms of performance on their mobile devices, now being brought to the Mac, which a lot of people speculated and a lot of people thought was the right move. This means Apple truly controls the ecosystem here when it comes to hardware and software, and with that, we'll see a lot of better native performance and support, of course, from their own apps, and that's what they highlighted. They highlighted things like Final Cut, of course, major partners like Microsoft and or Adobe apps running natively on the new ARM processors, and this means faster overall performance at the end of the day, where translates to. Now, this means Apple also has to, of course, prepare developers to help support this. And for those of you worried about your Intel-based Macs, don't worry. Apple has vowed to support for the upcoming years Intel-based Macs as far as Mac OS updates. So, for example, Big Sur will still support Macs all the way back to 2013. That said, they talked a lot about that ARM-based transition and what that's going to look like and how it's going to take at least 2 years to fully transition over to ARM-based processors across our lineup. But exciting news nonetheless. Outside of that, it was a big focus on privacy across Mac OS and just Apple's ecosystem in general. They talked a lot about how app privacy will now have the ability to allow developers to include an app privacy report, meaning before you even download an app, you can see what type of data the app will have access to and why it needs that. So you get a full privacy report prior to you even installing the application in the App Store, which again, I think is a nice touch, though this is self-reported by the developer, so hopefully there's a checks and balances system built into all of this. But again, it's a step in the right direction in terms of privacy. So that really, wraps up the OS announcements. I think the one miscellaneous announcement I did want to touch on is the AirPods Pro. Apple has announced that the AirPods will have a feature now to seamlessly switch between devices. So for example, I tend to use mine on my iPhone, but sometimes I need to watch something on my iPad or my Mac. It will now be able to recognize what device you're using and switch automatically rather than you manually having to do that in the Bluetooth settings. I don't think this is limited to just the AirPods Pro, but I might be wrong. I do know this other feature, the spatial audio feature, is specifically AirPods Pro only. Spatial audio takes a look at things like what you're familiar with like surround sound in general, or Dolby Atmos, I guess is a better comparison, where it looks at sound that you're listening to and tries to match in relation to the soundscape. So if a plane's flying overhead, you want to hear the sound come slowly and gradually above and over to the rears. Now, obviously, with two AirPods, it can't fully achieve that, but from a technical perspective, they're using digital software to fine-tune the frequencies to kind of recreate that effect. We've seen people do this in the past and with much success, with soundbars, for example. So we're going to have to see how well these AirPod Pros are able to truly recreate that using their gyroscope and all this information that the device feeds back, how accurate it actually sounds. Again, this is something that's going to require some real-world testing, but it's nice to see Apple announcing features like this on hardware that they already have out there just via a software update. But yeah, that recaps all the major news announced at today's Apple's WWDC 2020 event. Overall, I think, macOS, while I'm not sold on the design change, I am excited to see the ARM-based transition and what this means for Apple going forward, to see how much performance and just overall efficiency they can utilize out of the ARM-based processors on the desktop and laptop platform, and seeing how that translates to battery life, overall just speed and usability of the machines. Again, the features that we saw across iOS, iPadOS, the ones I'm most excited for are living in iMessage and whatnot, and of course finally seeing these widget effects and whatnot. Having recently jailbroke, I will say a lot of these tweaks that they applied in iOS 14 are things that I had in my jailbreak experience, so it's nice to see, but again, stuff that we've all wanted and stuff that other platforms have had for quite some time. So nothing crazy exciting, but just nice to finally have. Love to hear your thoughts and opinions on Apple's releases today. Again, no new hardware, as we kind of expected in the rumor said. I expect we're going to see in the next week or so announcements of that new hardware so that it doesn't fully take away from the announcements of the software made today. We're probably going to see things like the newer iPad or the newer iMac announced down the line relatively soon, to, again, kind of touch and base with all the stuff that they talked about today. So leave a like, thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more tech content if you're not subscribed. Comment down below on your thoughts and opinions. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for watching.